right, gang. That sound, you got it. That annoying sound is the sound that it's time for the weekly Mac Forum video chat. We're running on Monday this week as opposed to the usual Sunday night broadcast. Had a little technical issue last night that adversely affected the sound. So we're coming at it today. Try another crack at this here. All right, let's get right into things. Won't hold everything up for too long. We'll keep you busy for a little bit tonight. First off, want to welcome our newest member. As you can see, Syrup Fiend on the into the forum, and welcome to all the new members that joined in the previous week. Hope you enjoy your stay in the forum and find a lot of useful information. You'll certainly find a lot of helpful people and a lot of questions that are being asked and answered. And on that note, before I forget, let me remind you, you can lurk and read the questions and answers, but in order to be able to ask a question, you need to become a member, which is free, doesn't cost you anything. And I hope that if you have a question, you'll go ahead and join, and also consider becoming a premium member and supporting the forum. All right, let's get right into, speaking of the forum, let's get right into some of the things that came up this week. I just have one or two things that I pulled out of the forum for the previous week. Just some things that stuck in my mind as potentially useful bits and pieces of information here. First of all, let's take a look at this is a thread. Mad Dog 46 asked a question about battery life and how you extend it. Obviously, if you are on a laptop or even a phone or other device, I suppose, you would want to extend your life, battery life, as far as you can. And this question comes up periodically on the forum. And what Mad Dog 46 wanted to know was how exactly you go about extending the life of your battery. Well, this thread deals with the issue of whether you should take your laptop and run it on battery as much as possible, or leave it on the charger. Okay, and in the thread, there, Rad Dave provided link to some discussions about this matter, and essentially, Apple's suggestion is to use the notebook on electricity when possible, and about once a month, run the battery down to about 10%. Which will basically recalibrate the battery monitoring system. Now, this recalibration, i.e. running the battery down to 10% once a month, is not really for the health of the battery. It is more a function of recalibrating all of the circuitry that monitors battery health and tells you how much time is left on your battery. And in this thread, we also have a discussion of the charge cycles. Each battery in the laptop, in the Mac laptop, is rated for a certain number of charge cycles. And essentially, a charge cycle is one full discharge down to 0 and then recharging back up to 100%. If you discharge the battery down to 50% and then go back to 100%, that would be the equivalent roughly of half a charge cycle. Over time, each charge cycle decreases the battery's capacity from its original specifications, and that means the fewer times that you are able to drain it. So the fewer times that you drain the battery down really low, the better, and the longer it will last. Now, you do want to, as I say, once a month, drain that battery down to around 10-12%, and then plug it back in, let it go ahead and charge up. The batteries, essentially, in all the recent uh, Macs for over the last several years have been uh, some variation of lithium ion battery, and how many charge cycles you should be able to get is going to depend upon uh, the specific model involved. Some of the Mac notebooks have larger batteries, and therefore you're going to have a little bit longer capacity, those kinds of things. All right, so that's one of the things that you want to keep an eye out for, and this is a pretty good discussion. If you're new to this whole issue of laptop batteries, this is a good overview. It doesn't get bogged down in highly technical terms. All right, and then the next thing I want to point out to you, another thread here that I found kind of interesting because I never tried this particular technique, has to do with carrying PowerPoint audio across um, multiple slides. And this is something that you can easily do. I had never done it before. I'd seen it done. I had never personally done it. And member Glenn's daughter asked about this. And as usual, Ian came up with a solution, has links in his post to a description of that thread of how to do that. And so I put that in there in case you might find that useful. It's a pretty interesting idea. I haven't tried it yet, mainly because I haven't had a need to do that type of slide in a while. So go ahead and check that thread out if you have an inclination. And then I'm going to move on over now into the iPhone tips, iPhone iOS tips section of the show. And this first one, I had set this up to demo last night, and I kind of forgot to get my wife to call me tonight to prove to you that this works. But here's essentially what goes on with this first tip. It's how to get Siri on your iPhone or your iPad to announce an incoming call if you're using iOS 10. Okay? And essentially what you're going to do is go into settings on your phone, scroll down until you see the one that said the setting that says phone. Then you're going to want to tap on the setting that says announce calls. The default setting is never, and you want to change that to something else. You have a couple of different options there. You want to change it. Now, see, in the screenshot, you'll see that they've set it to headphones and car, but you also have headphones only or always as an option. When you change, let's say you change it to always, every time you get a call, it will then announce, Siri's voice will announce who the call is from. That's really handy if, say, for example, you're jogging or you've got your phone in your pocket for some other reason and you don't want to necessarily pick up and answer every call that comes through. So this is a good way to identify who the caller is. Now, one word of caution about that. The name that gets announced is however you have that name in your contact. So let's say you have someone named John Smith in your contact, and that's the one that just called you. It's going to announce it as John Smith. Siri announces it based on the contact information. If you just want it to say John, then the only way I found to do that so far is to edit your contact card in contacts so that the name only says John and not John Smith. All right, so that gives you an idea how that functions. I've tried it a little bit. I'm not sure if I like it enough to continue using it, but it's an interesting idea. It's not helpful to me a whole lot because most of the day my phone, the ringer and speaker and everything are on mute. But that's a handy one to have for you if you're interested in that kind of thing. And it's a neat little trick. Um, all right, the next one uh, involves, and I won't read through all of this because it's a rather lengthy article. Once again, it comes from iPhone Life magazine. Sarah Kingsbury, as you can see there on the screen, has to do with finding your iPhone even when it's dead. It has a number of tips and tricks for using Find My Phone in a variety of situations. And of course, the key to all of them is that you have at some point activated Find My Phone on the phone that you're trying to find. But it gives you some tips on how to use it in situations where normally people might not think of it as working very well. That's a really good tip. I'll have a link to it, of course, in the show. But as I say, I won't try to explain it all by audio. Some of them can get a little confusing. If you read through the article, you can pick and choose the ones that seem to be most appropriate to your situation. I can tell you from experience, um, I misplaced my iPhone in the apartment one day, and it took me quite a while to find it because even though Find My Phone is capable of ringing the phone, the ringer was on mute and set to vibrate. So it really took me a little while, but there are some things that you can do to make Find My Phone function a little better for you. And I hope that tip comes in handy. All right, next one, and I'm going to try this tomorrow. We've got a little day trip planned to run a few errands. I'm going to try this one tomorrow. I had not thought of this. This is a really good idea. I am among that mass of people affectionately referred to as directionally challenged, okay? Inside the apartment, I find my way just fine. Outside the apartment, it's a real toss up here, folks. And for people like me, who are who occasionally get lost, I have a tip here that I ran into. Now this one that's on screen is different. This is part of 10 tips from 10, 10 different iOS 10 tips. And this is from Connor Carey at iPhone Life magazine. But I have one other one that I wanted to squeeze in tonight, along with some of these. Some of these in the 10 tips segment we've covered in other shows, but there are a few new ones here, and they're well written, so I encourage you to take a look at that article. But the one that I want to get into, and I don't have the page up for the show. I thought I had that one, and I must have closed it by accident earlier. But here's one for you that I had not thought of. Let's say that you're one of these folks that loses your car in a parking lot. You go to the mall, or you go to, wholesale club, movie theater, wherever, and you lose your car in the parking lot. Okay. Now, if you have a newer car that supports CarPlay, or Bluetooth, then iOS 10 works well with that, with Find My Car. But if you do have an older car that doesn't have those two features, what do you do? Okay. Here's a little trick that I had not really thought of at all, but it's a kind of neat idea. Assuming that you remember to do one little bit of prep. All right. What you're going to do is you're going to use the map function in Find My Phone or in the iPhone to locate your car, even if your car does not have AirPlay. Obviously, how good the directions will be will depend on how accurately the phone is able to track your location in the area that you're in. But it's worth a try. Here's what you do. At this first step is a little bit of advanced preparation on your part. When you get to the location where you park your car, open the map application. You will see a little blue pin there that shows your location. Tap there and drop a pin. Okay, go through the map application will offer to drop a pin there. Let it do it. Now, go ahead about your business. Do all the things you normally do. Go ahead and walk around the mall. Do whatever. When you come out of the building, when you're getting ready to leave the building, and you want to find your car, open the map application and get walking directions back to that pin. Now, as I say, I haven't had a chance to test this one yet. I had intended to try it today at work, and it completely slipped my mind when I left the parking lot this morning because it was raining. I forgot to drop a pin and see if it could direct me back to the right spot in the parking lot when I left. But it's worth a try. It's an interesting idea, interesting use for iPhone and iOS 10. And so that's one that you're going to maybe find useful. If you do find that this works well for you, drop a note in the forum and let me know. And as I say, the last one that we have as far as iOS tips here is an article from Connor Carey at iPhone Life magazine. And the tips that you'll find are how to use voicemail transcription, disabling raise to wake, which I believe we talked about on a previous episode. You can see here how to collaborate with notes in iOS 10, how to unsubscribe from email lists and do it relatively easily, and then getting directions for a location that's on your way in Apple Maps. And I have to say, when Apple Maps first came out, I did not use it a lot, in part because of some signal issues in our area with the carrier that we had at the time, and also because given the data plan that we had at the time, I didn't do a lot with maps when we were traveling. Subsequent to that, we've changed carriers, gotten a little bit better coverage, and I have a little bit different data plan, so I'm using maps a little more often. And just as an aside, as a funny story, when we first changed carriers, I pulled up the directions to one of these wholesale club places that's about an hour and a half away from where we are. And it had been quite a while since we'd gone down there. So I pulled the directions on the phone, put them on the phone, turned the volume up on the phone, and stuck the phone in my pocket. And completely forgot about the fact that maps will talk to you. And in part of the trip, you have a stretch of several miles, roughly 35, 40 minutes of travel, where you're on the same road. And so we're driving along. I'm talking to my wife. We've got the radio on. And after about a half an hour, I hear this noise. It's not her voice, and it's not the DJ on the radio. It wasn't me. And there's nothing in our car that should be talking to us, And it took me a minute to realize that it was the map function warning us about an upcoming turn. So those kinds of things, you always have little quirks like that the first time you use a feature or a function. But I've been finding maps to be more and more useful, and it seems like each iteration of the program gets a little bit smarter. So maybe this thing for getting directions and all of the other things that you can do with it is finally reaching a point where it rivals some of the other map functions that are available. All right, and that's going to just about do it for the iOS tips. I want to point you now in the direction of Kirk the iTunes guy over at Macworld. Now, if you're a regular listener, you know that I visit Kurt's website frequently, Kirkville, and his site is a good place to go for iTunes related information. And if you're interested in Macs and music in general, that's a good place to be. But this particular article comes from out of Macworld. And essentially, what happens here, let me scroll back up to the question and you'll see what I mean. Uh, the question is headed Vanishing Playlists. And the long and short of it is that the reader of the column who posted this question had an issue with playlists where not all of their playlists were showing. So in previous iterations of iTunes, if you had, let's say you had some playlists that had music and some playlists that had audiobooks, when you showed playlists in the sidebar, all of those playlists showed. And a lot of people like that ability to have all of your playlists, whether they're audiobooks or music or video or whatever they are, show up. Well, beginning with iTunes 12.5, they've changed the way this is handled. By default, it shows you playlists for the type of media that you have selected, not all of your playlist. Or to put that another way, what it basically means is if, let's say, you have music selected in the top for type of media, then it's going to show you all your music related playlists. It's not going to show you audiobooks, it's not going to show you video, okay, that kind of thing. When you change and have it go to the audiobooks, now it's going to show you the audiobook section, but or playlist, but you won't see any of the music playlists. Now that's the default behavior. But as Kirk mentions, one thing that you can do to get that back to viewing all of your playlist, click on the sidebar where it says music playlist, for example, and choose all playlists. Okay, and what happens now is this will go back to the older behavior of displaying playlists with all the media types. Okay, but you'll need to do this in each library where you want to view all of your playlists. So it's a little bit different change. Every time you load a different library, you'll have to make that change in that setting. I'm kind of glad to see that they didn't take that ability away entirely. I can kind of understand why they did it the way they did, because if you're someone that uses playlists a lot, you can have a ton of playlists sticking there and cluttering up space. I don't mind that when I'm on the computer. I have a big enough screen that it's not an issue, and I don't have quite as many playlists as I used to. I need to create a few more just for kind of organizational purposes. We may spend some time on that in a future broadcast, talking about the advantages and disadvantages of playlists, smart playlists. If I can ever figure out the right way to handle them, these what are sometimes referred to as nested playlists. You can do some really interesting things with playlists if you take the time to monkey around with it a little bit. So that does it for this week's tips and tricks. No mini rant on my part this week. Nothing that really annoyed me to the point of needing to be really obnoxious. So that's going to just about do it for this week's show, guys. I enjoyed bringing you all the information this evening. I hope that you've enjoyed hearing it. And I will be seeing you during the week in the forum. Drop us a note if you like the show or if you have an idea of some of the things that you would like to see us discuss. And I will see you back next week. Until next week, this has been your host, Sylvester Rock, a.k.a. Sly Dude on the forum. And I want to thank you for joining me. And we'll see you next week.